So the reason there are bullion banks and the central banks hold gold is because that's the major mechanism to keep you in their game. And I think as we've seen lately, that game is on its last leg, the LBMA fractional reserve game, just like the London Gold Pool game ran for about 8 years or a few years and then collapsed in 68. I think we're very much the same juncture. Wednesday, February 26th, 2025, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Well, today we're going to look at M2, which is a measure of money supply and how it's started picking up again, the growth of M2. And we're also going to look at the M2 adjusted price of gold, because if you think about it, M2 is the money supply, really. And what has been money for thousands of years? Well, it's gold. So we're going to look at the data going back to 1960 and today, and do some comparative analysis of the gold price back in the 60s and now, and what happened to the gold price, and what kind of mechanisms the central banks and the treasuries of the West were using to control the gold price. Before we do, though, just like to talk about a few things that are going on really out there in the world. The first one that I think is important for us here in the UK and also in the EU or on the continent is the fact that our governments, our states, the state here in the UK, in the EU, or Germany, or wherever else in Europe, they're having a very tough time. They're in trouble. And why is that? Well, the usual suspect is unsurmountable debts, corrupt government, big government, and they're resorting to fear and the prospects of war. And that is not surprising, and unfortunately I think is going to continue. We've seen that, yes, the Prime Minister here, Keir Starmer, is going to increase military spending, albeit it's not a huge increase, but he's talking about sending troops to Ukraine. And the whole of Europe seems to be on a suicide mission, and it seems strange to me. But if you really dig under the surface, it's all to do with a failing state, and there's nothing better to keep your subjects or your citizens under your control than pushing a lot of fear of everything, fear of war, fear of enemies like Russia, right? There's the old saying that war is the health of the state. So what do we do in such a situation? I think we need to try to not to fall for the trap of being fearful, and try to tell people as much as possible what you think is really happening. So what's the other topic I wanted to talk about before we go into M2? Well, the U.S. economy, we've seen weaker numbers again. Yesterday, consumer confidence was a lot lower than expected, and we're even noting that the United States Treasury Secretary Bessent has admitted. He said that the economy is more fragile under the surface than economic metrics suggest. So, and that's very significant, I think, because coupled with what we're going to see in M2, it's not a good combination. A slowing economy, maybe even a recession, and money supply growing at the fastest pace in a few years. That's going to lead to more stagflation. And before we segue into money supply, just wanted to make you aware that Miles Franklin, my U.S. precious metals dealer, still has some really great specials. He's got these here. They call junk silver. He's got half dollars pre-65. They're 90% silver. He's got dimes and quarters. And they're all at very reasonable premiums compared to the market price. And I know this because I was with Andy in January, and he's got quite a bit of these specials here, but they're not going to last that long. Is the pre-33 gold pieces, U.S. gold pieces. So as you can see here, he's got $20 St. Gaudens coins, random years, only $50 over melt, and they're beautiful coins. And I can show you one of mine. So there you go. That's the St. Gaudens. There you go. This one is 1908. So yeah, if you're interested, if you haven't started moving your fiat, depreciating fiat dollars into real money, think about contacting Miles Franklin and telling them that Mario or Monaco 64 sent you there. All the details how to get in touch with them are below in the description. So back to M2. Well, I think the first thing we need to do is look at the definition of M2. So I've gone to Investopedia, M2 definition and meaning in the money supply. It's very simple. So what is M2? M2 is the U.S. Federal Reserve's estimate of the total money supply, including all the cash people have on hand and coins, I would say as well. Even though those are they're becoming less and less important. Plus all the money deposited in checking accounts, savings accounts, and other short-term savings vehicles such as certificates of deposits or CDs. And retirement account balances and time deposits above 100,000 are omitted from M2. So that's what M2 is. And M1, of course, is just the cash and coins. And I have to add traveler's checks, which is something that people don't use anymore, but technically it's part of M1. And then M2, you add M1 plus the money on deposit and checking accounts and savings accounts and short-term savings. So that's how it works. And let's go back to, let's say, 1885. Just picked a random year. And we were, or the US was on physical money standard gold and had silver as well circulating. So all the money supply was gold and silver. Yes, some people deposited their gold and silver in banks and they got the banknotes, right? The promissory notes. And those were from like different banks. There was no Fed. So yes, and the bankers, of course, they a lot of times lent out and gave out those notes without having the gold or silver backing. That's called fractional reserve. And it's been happening since time immemorial because the goldsmiths, the money changers, they realize that people don't come every day for their money with their promissory notes. So they're able to get away with it, which is kind of not right, but that's the way it is. And the reason I'm talking about this is that when we're going to look now at M2, adjusted price for gold, we're also going to look at the gold cover, which means that you don't need as much gold in order to back the money supply. And it's mainly because of the fractional reserve situation. So just wanted to show you here. Zero Hedge came out yesterday. And it's weird because I was looking at this topic prior to seeing this post on X. I was looking at M2. I look at it regularly to see what it's doing. And I had the idea of making this video. And lo and behold, Zero Hedge says M2 rises at fastest pace in 30 months. And I hadn't calculated the pace like they had. I had seen, though, that, as you can see here, that M2 is almost back to the levels where it was in April of 2022 when M2 reached its record of around $21.72 trillion. Right now, we're back to $21.56 trillion. Yes, it did unwind. That's real deflation. We had deflation by October 2023. M2 was down to around 20.6 trillion. But now, as you can see, it's picking up. And if you can remember well, here during COVID, M2 was way below where it is now. It was 15.4 trillion, and it really picked up. It was probably the biggest increase in the money supply ever. I think 75% of all the Federal Reserve notes or the money supply were created in that period, short amount of years, which is amazing. And it's interesting because when I went to the US, I got some Federal Reserve notes, or dollar bills if you want to call them, and with the exception of one or two, they're all signed by Steve Mnuchin, which is not surprising because it was under his watch as Secretary of the Treasury that all this currency was printed, and he had to sign it. So it wasn't just the Biden administration that got the inflation going. It was also the Trump administration. And I'm not saying that what Trump is doing now isn't good, but I'm just giving credit where it's due. But anyway, back to M2. So I saw this yesterday and I thought, wow, it's growing back again, almost back to record highs. And Zero Hedge confirmed that it's growing really fast. And despite that, the economy seems to be slowing down, as the Secretary of the Treasury said. So what about gold and M2? And by now, hopefully you understand why M2 is so important to determining the gold price. So I thought I'd look at M2 back in 1960 because, as you can see here, you can go all the way back to 1960. And it's easy to know what the gold price was then because it was fixed at $35 per troy ounce. So I did a little calculation. I took M2 at the end of 1960, and it was at $312.4 billion. It wasn't in the trillions yet. And then I had to find the gold holdings for the U.S. How much gold did the U.S. purport to have? You know, how much do they say they have? And it's easy to find. If you go gold reserves on Wikipedia, it gives you the gold reserves of all major nations, but it also gives you a really good chart of official U.S. gold reserves from 1900 to 2008. And if you go to 1960, you can pretty much estimate that, looking at the chart, that U.S. official gold reserves were at 15,000 metric tons, which is, almost double where it's now. But as you can see as well, it had been dropping ever since the late 40s, early 50s. It got up to around 22,000 tons back just before the 1950s. So, yeah, I converted, of course, metric tons into troy ounces. And the reason I say troy ounces is because it's really important that you differentiate between ounces and troy ounces, because one troy ounce is 31.1035 grams, and one normal ounce is 28 grams. So that's why people say troy ounces. But anyway, in troy ounces, it was 482.26 million ounces of gold reserves. So it's very simple. You take the money supply, 312.4 billion, divided into the gold holdings, and I got a number of 666.45. No, I'm not trying to give a message here with these numbers. It just accidentally came to that. And as we spoke earlier about the money changes in the fractional reserve mechanism, we could say that the gold price should be, let's say, a third or 40%. You know, the Fed had by law had to keep a 40% gold cover. So let's see what that would mean in terms of price. 40% gold cover. Well, that would be a price of $266.58. So you might be asking now, well, how were they able to keep that $35 price during the 60s? Well, there are two reasons why they're able to keep it. First one is that you couldn't trade gold in the U.S. up until 1975. It was illegal. So you could keep that statutory price of 35. But the problem was the international market in London and Zurich. And they had a problem because I'm sure people were looking at that, at the money supply. People like John Exter at the time, who started buying gold. Even though it was illegal, there were ways around it. So they could buy foreign coins that were considered numismatics. James Dines started looking into this in the 60s, and he told his friends on Wall Street that the price was going to go way through that 35 level, and he was basically ostracized and had to leave Wall Street. But the other way that they were able to keep the price at 35 is that they created something called the London Gold Pool, and that was the U.S. Treasury and the major treasuries of the major European countries like Britain, Italy, Germany, France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. They got together and they used their gold to keep the $35 price there. They probably used a lot of paper gold as well. They did a lot of leasing, like the LBMA has been doing for the last 30 years back then. And they were able to keep that $35 price up until 1968, when confidence in this London Pool scheme broke, and the French started saying, no, we don't want to do that anymore. And they started taking their gold. They started redeeming dollars. And it broke the whole system, and eventually it broke the whole Bretton Woods system in 1971. And that price of 666 was not like outlandish if you waited and if you were patient enough, because by 1980, of course, gold got almost up to 900. So where are we now? You must be asking. Well, right now, the money supply, we saw that it was, let's say, where was it? Let's have a quick look. 21.561 trillion, right? So we do the same thing that we did for 1960. We take that money supply. The gold reserves now, though, are a lot lower. They're like kind of half of what they were. Even not so good. 261 million troy ounces or thereabouts. And at 100% cover for the money supply with gold, I get 82,610.7. And yes, that price seems very outlandish, just like 666 must have sounded back in 1960. And but if you let's say do a 40%, and I'm using my Hewlett Packard calculator, shows you how old I am. My dad used this, and it's the reason why I used it. He said you should get one. Anyway, if you use 40% cover, the gold price would be 33,000, which doesn't sound that outlandish. But one thing, so we're going to stop right here, and you can do this exercise yourself. Use the cover that you want. You can use 100%, 50, 40, 30, whatever you want. But yeah, one thing I wanted to say, especially with what went on yesterday with the gold and silver price, yes, it's kind of annoying and disturbing to see these big moves, but it's part of their scheme to keep people away from gold and silver, is to make it the paper market very speculative. Once in a while you see these sharp moves down, and it puts people off. And the reason they do that, of course, is because they don't want you to have physical gold and silver. They want you to stay in their fractional reserve fiat currency system, because that's how they keep control of you. And have you ever wondered why, if we're not supposed to be under a gold backed system, or have you ever wondered why, if gold is not that important, why central banks hold it, and why they're bullion banks? I mean, a lot of people, the majority of people, I would say, don't even know what bullion banks are. So the reason there are bullion banks and the central banks hold gold is because that's the major mechanism to keep you in their game. And I think, as we've seen lately, that game is on its last leg, the LBMA fractional reserve game. Just like the London Gold Pool game ran for about 8 years or a few years and then collapsed in 68. I think we're very much the same juncture. And yes, what you need to know as well, in my opinion, is that when this scheme unravels, there's not going to be any bank out there. And yes, a lot of people are going to ask me, what about credit unions or this and that? No, there's going to be no safe banks out there. And that's why I think it's really important that you keep as little as possible of your savings with these banks. I guess you have to keep some for day-to-day transactions and for emergencies. And if you're running a business, you need some liquidity. But I don't think they're safe at all. And there will be a day when everything unravels, and gold and silver are going to come back. And I think it's already coming back, despite what might happen in terms of revaluation or Fort Knox. The fact that you have Tucker Carlson interviewing Luke Gromen about gold for an hour and a half the other day is very significant. Gold is back in the public domain. People are talking about gold, not as jewelry, but about how important gold is to the system. And I highly recommend you watch this interview. Tucker Carlson has a YouTube channel. He also has his own website, which you have to pay for, which isn't that bad, actually. I actually pay for it. And some people say, well, Tucker Carlson is CIA, and he's a Mockingbird media. Maybe so, but I think he's bringing out a lot of truths out there, and we have to give him some slack, because people change their minds. You know, when you grow up or you grow older, you realize things. I didn't know a tenth of what I know now 35 years ago. Yeah, so there you go. I'm going to stop right here. The markets are pretty steady this morning. Yeah, we'll keep in touch. And I hope you're all doing really well. And I wish you all also a very good day. Take care. Bye.